Something that, an observation that I've noticed, and this actually does kind of, I think, matter in Overwatch League as well. A little less so because you're a player personality, right? When people think of Dogman, I think they, or when they think of Overwatch League, you're definitely one of the personalities that we think about, right? In terms of Tier 2 and other aspects of Overwatch League, I think the casters are probably the most well-known out of everyone in the league. They have the most face time, and they have a lot of influence, particularly in Tier 2. Do we need more player personalities to rise to the occasion? So instead of people liking certain casters in contenders, they can start getting into player personalities and start developing fan bases around that. I think Samito is a really good example of someone who's doing that well in Tier 2. But I think there needs to be more of that.
I would agree, but I think for the most part, what's valued right now, especially in Overwatch in general, in Overwatch League and contenders, it's like I don't necessarily know if I think player personalities is like I'm not sure if Overwatch League is the environment or like Overwatch is the game for that to take priority over skill. So it's like there's players
So what I'm saying is, like, if you have the skill,
to
brand yourself a little bit better, right? Because it's only going to help.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a good idea, but like for the most part, yeah, it's like we have like players like Frill, right, in the Tier 2 scene, which is a very outspoken. He's a funny guy for the most part, but like I think that kind of stuff actually might even like turn off teams from like those players, like because like. Even for me, like I don't necessarily know how valuable it is to be a big personality in Overwatch. Like sure, like overall for my long-term career, it's great, but like for Atlanta Reign or for like specifically Overwatch League teams, they're not necessarily looking for personalities. They're looking for more, we want to win, and I think that's what's turning off a lot of big personalities from wanting to play in the Overwatch League. Like why play in the Overwatch League when you can have a bigger brand outside of it? You could do something on Twitch or whatever, So it's like, I think for the most part, Overwatch League is more of a very winning environment, which is a good thing, I think, for Overwatch League. But in turn, that also does kind of turn away some of the bigger personalities, I think.
Well, you actually, now that you say that, you actually a question kind of comes up in my brain is that a good thing? Because part of me thinks that, yeah, it could totally be a good thing, because then people who want to do their thing can do their thing. There's been examples of it with DeFran and Siegel, right? Where these bigger personalities said, I'm going to make more money doing this. But Overwatch League is supposed to be like the peak of that competitive atmosphere. It's the best of the best. Is there a world where these two things can kind of forge together, or do you think it'll usually be separate?
I think probably, I guess I'd be the best example of like forging together, because I don't think like I'm not like Siegel, I'm not the friend, I don't have some massive stream, but I'm also not Jonak, I'm not Carpe, I'm not like one of the top players in the league. So it's like I think mixing both is where I'm at now. And I think, sometime in the near future, I probably have to make a decision, whether to split up or not. I think even for someone like me that's not, DeFran, not the top player in the league, I think even then, there is that distinct like oil and water kind of, they just have to separate at some point, simply just because Overwatch League doesn't necessarily, I think just value big personalities,
Yeah, totally. And, I've always said that, like, the reason why you've always been, full disclosure, bias caster here, you've always been one of my favorite players to watch in general, is that you're so emotional about how, not emotional might not be the best word, but you're so passionate about how you play and what you're doing, and that comes out in your personality. And I think I want to see a little bit more of that just in general in Overwatch League, and see that passion really come out, as opposed to some of the by rote kind of answers we get from some of these interviews. Just a little bit of more sprinkle is kind of what I think I'm asking for, and you're definitely the rainbow sprinkles of some of these situations, Dogman, and I appreciate you for that.
Thanks, Boop. Yeah, I think like, well, sorry to continue on for a little bit. But
yeah, no worries, man.
I think like specifically with Overwatch, like I think what needs to happen is, I don't even know if anything needs to happen necessarily. I think it's just the nature of the game, and I think the nature of Overwatch League as a whole. I think it's just like the people that benefit from big personalities and people doing some, wacky, crazy stuff is like the league itself. And then I think the fans for the most part. But and then after that, I think that's about it. I mean, some of the players like it for the most part because it adds competitive drive, I think. But for the most part, yeah, I don't think. I think teams are trying to kind of necessarily don't necessarily benefit from that because I think of the equal revenue in Overwatch League because like everybody gets the same revenue. So it's like, what's the point of having a popular player on your team if that just helps everybody in the league, not necessarily your team, you know? So it's like
interesting. I did not know that. Yeah, that's super interesting. You're totally right.
It's just something I've been personally thinking about. So I think overall, the league benefits from big personalities, but not necessarily the teams.
That's super interesting. Because like one of my favorite football players is Richard Sherman, and that's exactly what he is. He's like a big personality. He likes, ruffling feathers and causing tension, but that helps the Seahawks more so than the NFL, right? Because of the kind of cult of personality that it brings. So that's super interesting. I'm definitely gonna be thinking on that a little bit. But we're gonna go ahead and move on to some player signings. We're not gonna go over all the ones that we had planned because I want to get to know you a little bit better, Dogman. But something that I want to know from your brain is kind of what you think of the Atlanta Reign so far. I know you're probably gonna be biased towards one side here, but the new signings for you guys are Hawk and Gator from the Atlanta Academy squad and Edison coming in for the season. I'm so excited to see Hawk and Gator. I think Hawk is was the biggest brain in Tier 2 when he was on Atlanta Academy. And it's so funny because when I was talking to some other Tier 2 players, every single person had nothing but nice things to say about Hawk. It was unanimous. It's kind of like Golden Boy. Everyone loves that man, right? And if you don't, then something might be wrong with you. But Gator was a top performer in Overwatch League on a Sigma. So, and I'm not super familiar with Edison. So can you walk us through where these pickups came from, why they're there, and why you're excited?
Well, yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I mean, who knows what's going on with me, in Overwatch League, boys. I mean, who knows, Chris, where I'll go, am I staying with Atlanta or am I not, who knows?
Yeah. You did put those eyes up on Twitter. So
exactly.
Yeah.
But let's see. So with Atlanta, I guess overall, I know from playing with Hawk and then playing with Gator, I'm surprised a lot of people do like Hawk because Hawk is probably one of the biggest trash talkers, I think, out in contenders where he's like a big trash talker, but he's like the fluff trash talker kind of where he's like the scared trash talker. He'll trash talk someone like crazy, but he won't actually say anything. He just he's that type of kid that just he goes along with it. And I think Gator is probably the more outspoken one. Yeah. So they're both really good, really talented players, and I think that's kind of showed especially during this offseason. I think Honk and Gator were some of the most sought after Western players in the league simply because of Hawk turning 18. Now he's posed to be the next space, right? Mm-hmm. And then Gator had a really phenomenal season and is a really good leader. So I mean, having those two players in itself, if you got that duo or got anybody from our academy team, or even the Western players from our main team, then you probably have a pretty good environment just off those two. So they already add some insane skill and mechanics, but they just bring something extra to the team. And then Edison, I think I don't know too much about him. He's kind of in my eyes, he's kind of I viewed Erster. Last year, yeah. I kind of doubted Erster. I was oh, I don't necessarily know if I think this guy's that good. Considering I was oh, Moss is a god. I was oh, Pokpo and Dako played in Elma Mystic, and then Erster played in Chinese Contenders. I was oh, I don't know about that. And it's kind of like that with Edison, where it's I don't know if GC Busan was that good of a team, but I think there's also the doubting aspect that I know there's a reason that he was so hyped, and that there's a reason that Edison was such a popular player is because he was that good in Contenders. So it's it's more or less putting my opinions aside and understanding the greater, idea behind Edison is that Edison is a really good player. So, I think Atlanta's picked up some really good talent.
I think it's kind of the question of, do you want to be the best player on a bad team, or do you want to share the spotlight with 3 other people on a good team, right? Where are you going to get the most eyes on you? Where are you going to get the most fairness in terms of scouting? And I think you kind of spoke on that a little bit. But let's talk about just player transfers in general, because something that it feels like the whole league is moving, right? It feels like literally no one is on the same team anymore. And like when teams need to like put out things on Twitter like this guy is staying, there's been a lot of transfers and trades going on in the league so far, and that's got to be tough for you guys, right? Because yeah, some of y'all are under contract, but now that you guys are going to be traveling so much next season, I think teams are really starting to secure rosters maybe for the long term going into traveling, because who you're going to have on your team is who you're paying for every time you travel to a different stadium. Every time they need, somewhere to stay, you're paying for all of those people. And it must be hard not really knowing where you might live next year, right? Because in the NFL, I always like bringing traditional sports back into this. Like, it's mid-season, you're getting traded to Miami, right? You're gonna get set, you're gonna stand up and leave, right? And in esports, we haven't really felt this before, so it must feel a little interesting to you guys based off the fact that it's still not over. We're still seeing things like Neptuno go into the Charge, Jahan gonna be on the Titans, right? Like no one seems to know where they're gonna be.
Yeah, I think it kind of takes being a little bit more of an adult, probably to be able to deal with it. Sorry. I think like overall, I realized that you could be traded, you can be having to move or whatever, and I think at the same time that might turn people off from playing for certain teams or from even trading mid-season. So I think overall I've just kind of decided to pack light, just like maybe not pack that much, because a year goes by quick and then you don't know what happens after that, right?
Yep, exactly. So are you visiting any places soon, Mr. Dogman? You know where I'm getting at this.
Am I? Where am I? I don't know. I mean, I already kind of did everything. I kind of went to Korea and stuff like that, already, and now I'm just kind of back in work mode. Back in grinding Overwatch.
So speaking of Overwatch, before we get into the interview portion, just really quickly, what have you been thinking about Overwatch 2? What do you think of the announcement? You were there, so you got to feel the hype of the crowd. Are you excited for where the game is going? Do you like push? What is your general expectation going into the sequel?
Yeah, I think I'm along with those guys that are cautiously optimistic about it. It's just like I'm excited for it. I think it will be, or it could be a re-hype of Overwatch to kind of like to bring everything back. So I'm excited for it. I think it was a fun game. I played the PvE. I actually didn't even get to play the PvP. I didn't get to play the new push game. I only played it like once or twice, the whole event, sadly. But I think everyone from what I could tell liked it a lot. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited about it. I like the new look of it. I mean, the Genji. I'm excited for all that Genji cosplay that we're about to see. It's going to be like the Harley Quinn of Comic-Con, right? It's going to be easy just to get a hoodie and look like Genji in streetwear. And that cinematic was pretty awesome. I've watched it probably about 15 times at this point in time. You can't beat Blizzard when it comes to putting.
Well, which one was better? Was Diablo better or was Overwatch better?
Diablo was like a movie. You know what I mean? Like that felt like an entire experience, and oh my god, that was so cool. And when they when they showed Lilith finally and her big old wings, right? That was sick. Like I've never wanted to buy like a figure before, but I was like, that would be sick on a desk to hold my papers down, right? The Overwatch, the Overwatch ones was more like down home. It was like watching more of a romantic comedy versus like a super heady movie, like a documentary, like Diablo was.
Yeah, Diablo was hardcore.
Yeah. Overwatch was more like watching Sweet Home Alabama. Right.
Yeah,
it's like I love this. Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit lighter, but it was still had its moment, because part of me thought that Mei might die, and like I knew that wouldn't make sense, right? But
to kill off a hero.
Yeah, but it was emotional, and if it was Pixar, you don't know, right? They might have killed off that hero.
Yeah, that would have been depressing if we didn't have Mei anymore. Actually, no. People don't like Mei. Never mind. Just kill her. Overwatch, Blizzard, please kill Mei.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Anyway, man. So we usually take this next section to talk about something that's not Overwatch, but it's funny. You guys have been in grind mode for so long, and literally every single person except one, and that was Avril, was like, I don't really do anything other than Overwatch. And, I love that you guys grind, but, hopefully you guys get some time away from it when it starts getting frustrating. When you lose 5 games in a row, you get some time to take a break and reset. But we're going to go ahead.
We'll never lose 5 games in a row. I'm talking about Chris. We're not losers.
Fake news. Yeah. I mean, you're
that didn't happen.
you're not in Overwatch League because you're a loser. That's for sure.
Exactly.
It's because of your personality. Anyway, let's go ahead and go into the interview portion here. We've got about 15 more minutes before we're going to end things here for Overwatch Lately. But let's go ahead and start just quickly. What's your origin story, right? What was the moment that you're like, this is going to be what I do? Where are you from? Where'd you get your name? And what was your first kind of interaction with first-person shooters, Overwatch in general?
So I mean, like I began kind of in like high school, like playing more hardcore. I mean, I generally played video games since I was like maybe 9 or something like that. When I was a kid, I used to play on like the PlayStation. The PlayStation 2 at least was like was my system. But after I got a PC and stuff, I was like in high school. I think in my senior year, I was in the work program, which is like the program for kids to be able to take less classes so they can go to a job after school or like leave early. So I did the work program, but I also was like a state officer. So I also didn't have to have a real job. So what I did is I just would go to school for like 3 classes and I'd go home at lunch, like 12. And then I would nonstop play Counter-Strike my entire time in the house, like CSGO. So I was just like, all right, I'm just going to try to go professional in CSGO for like a year. And I couldn't. I just wasn't that good, and there was too much catching up I needed to do. So I was like, all right, I need to find another game to go professional in. So I tried Doom, like the new Doom 2016 came out, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to go pro in Doom. And I was like, this game's the crap. I'm just gonna get everybody else to like it.
Say it, man. You get
shit. Yeah, I was like, this game's fun as hell. I was like, I can go professional in it. And then I was like, and then all my friends were like, no, this game's gonna die. Don't play it. And I was like, what do you mean, man? This game's good. Come on. And then eventually it did die, and I was like, but like I was like, all right, maybe I started to realize I was like, okay, maybe this game isn't the healthiest environment to go professional in. So then I saw Overwatch was in beta, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll give this a try. I'll give the open beta a try. I was like, okay, I actually really like this game after the first day, and I was like, okay, I can try to go professional in it. And then that was kind of where it started. I didn't necessarily play Overwatch because I liked it. It's like I'm naturally better at FPSs. But I only played it just to try to go professional and play it as a pro.
Yeah, and so I mean, you ended up doing it. So when you go through these journeys, a lot of times you get help along the way. Who was your biggest influence when you were going through this journey of becoming a pro? Right? You said you're doing it because you had an affinity towards FPSs in general. You were naturally better at it. But was there a particular influence in your life that really helped push you over the hump?
I mean, there's probably like maybe 3 like general influences. It's like 3 combined, overall. It's like they either help me like directly with support, or they gave me some sort of like motivation, like or just even helped me at the beginning of the game because it was like the pro that I thought was the best at the time, and then I like copied all their settings, which was at the time I think Cloud9 Reaver was like one of the bigger names. I don't know if anybody remembers him, but he was like. I copied his resolution, which is like a weird resolution. It's like 1366 by 768. And so everything looks like trash. I play with like different brightness settings too. So I pretty much just copied this guy. And then I also like Grego on the same team as Reaver Cloud9 was like, I was a fan of him since Counter-Strike. I kind of just casually watched his stream. And then saw that he went pro in Overwatch. So I was like, okay, I guess I could do that too, or I could try to do that. And then the third one was I guess like, the tier 2 team would know probably Carter. Like Carter actually gave me a place to stay for like 6 months in Utah. And it was obviously awful living conditions, but he still gave me a place to stay for 6 months.
My favorite part is the qualifier of obviously there, right? So I've met Carter, and it's funny because I didn't notice that you said obviously. I just accepted it, right? It was like, yep, makes sense. Carter's a big deal in I think the streamer community. I think most people who stream in Overwatch know Carter. It's really interesting to see that he had that kind of influence even back then.
Yeah, Carter. I mean, I know people don't think Carter's a good guy. But I think overall, he has like, his issues like every other human, So I think I was fortunate enough to get the good side of Carter, and he gave me a place to stay. So was it when I got into Overwatch League, I gave him like because I didn't pay him any rent for the entire time, so I just gave him like $500. I was like, hey, thanks, man. And then he was like, hey, thanks, dude. And I was like, all right. So Carter's a really nice guy.
You probably doubled his salary as like an early Twitch streamer by giving him that $500, right? I that's why anytime I get loose change, I'm like, man, I'm making the big money now, guys. As a tier 2 Overwatch caster, this feels great. I've talked to Carter myself, and I think he's a little misunderstood personally. But I had a great interaction with them. I know he can be opinionated, but everyone's got their things, right? And so it's so crazy because I haven't heard the name Grego in so long. It's like you almost forget that this game's only like 3 years old, right? It really hasn't been that much time, and there are groups like FaZe and Cloud9 that had teams. Adam was a player on Cloud9, right? He wasn't just a coach of XL2, like he was a player and one of the best at the time. And it's just so crazy how far we've come from that in Contender Season 0 to having Atlanta Reign and Los Angeles Gladiators. It's crazy how far we've come. But we talked about you got to spend some time with Carter for 6 months. You had all these guys that you looked up to, but regardless of what game, something that you were able to accomplish is you were able to stay on that grind and you were able to stay in front of faces, right? You casted a little bit, you've gotten some desk work done, you're a personality in this industry. So what would you this is a general question for those of you who are watching or who are trying to get in. Where did you start, right? When did you know, like, okay, I'm on the right path? Regardless of what game, a lot of those kind of things are the same.
You kind of just got to know it from the beginning, I guess. It's like, I guess a lot of people can also fall into like a delusion that they can make it, or whatever, and they just kind of like never improve. I definitely think that there's a fine line to walk between, from the beginning knowing that you can do it, and then, from being delusioned, I guess. But to be honest, I think at the same time, everybody's a bit delusional, I guess. You have to be a bit crazy to try to make it as a professional, or make it, whatever you do, whatever your dream, is to set to be. So It's like from even day one, that's what I mean. Like, and I said, I was trying to find a game to go professional, and that was like my resolve, was like, okay, I'm going to go pro in this game. And I don't really care what anybody else says. So it's like, that was my look at it. And I don't necessarily know if it's the healthiest way of doing it. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know if there's any other way to do it in the first place, right? You kind of just have to do whatever is required of you to be a professional in the game. And for me, it was just to have belief in myself the whole time. So
I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, then what are you doing? Is kind of what I'm saying, right? And getting a career in esports is like betting it all on black, right? It will land sometimes, but other times it won't. And unfortunately, it just might not work out for you. But it's opportunity meets preparation, right? You got to be prepared for that moment, and if not, then you might not ever get that opportunity again. And you made sure that you're prepared for that opportunity when it came. That's why you're where you're at. So let's talk about like the middle part of your career. Your tier 2 time and some time with Jane. I did a little bit of research on you, and I realized that you were a big part of developing some of the talent in a tier 2. We talked about Dogman Akita and Dogman Beagle a little earlier. Some of those players still around. Some of them still walking the path of a tier 2 Overwatch. So when did you meet Jane, and when did you guys kind of decide that you guys were gonna do this together?
I met Jane, I think I didn't really meet him. I just kind of messaged. It was like a general, like, we knew each other kind of situation, where it's like, I knew him from the scene, and then he knew me from being a pro. So it's like, I generally just like was like, oh, this guy likes helping the tier 2 scene out a lot. I'll try to message him and see if we could do something. So that's kind of how Dogman and Akita. I didn't do shit for like helping them at all, to be honest. I was a really bad manager and coach. I kind of just like made the team, and I was like, all right, I'll set you the manager. We'll do traps for coaches, and then I'll just be hands off. I'll let you guys do your own thing.
Classic CEO, dude. Classic. Yeah. The professional way of saying that, instead of like that you're a shitty manager, is I delegated. I delegated a lot of the roles, and I made sure everyone felt important.
I can't even do that. Even Swimmer, like when Swimmer made Overwatch League, like they came up and they were like, oh, you helped me so much, you believed in me, and I was like, yeah, we just did tryouts, we just picked, I don't give it, you made it Overwatch. That's not because of me, that's because of you. I didn't do shit. But people think that that I helped them, which I'm glad they do. I guess I just haven't convinced myself in my head that I did.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like a personal problem to you, right? It's like sometimes it's hard for you to realize, like, it's easier to see negative impact that you've been able to, not you personally, just generally you as being people, when you hurt somebody or when you make someone upset. But when someone actually looks up to you and is like, hey, thank you, man, it's hard to accept that because you, right? Like, how could I have helped? Right. So I think you got to give yourself a little bit of credit, or maybe not. Maybe if you start doing that, your head might get too big. I don't know.
Exactly. I'm getting ego. You know, can't have that.
Got to be careful with that. So basically you're hands off with it. Some of those people, there's a moment I remember. The moment I became a fan of you is you were on Numbani on Zenyatta. You were back in the cubby by the store, and you brought back a fight 6v3 or something like that, and you lost the point, but you almost won it from, I forget, this was like 2 years ago. And that was the type of play that I was like, this guy, I remember turning to Eevee, and I remember like the type of play this guy makes, like that's exactly what Overwatch League needs, right? It's just to be able to pull these things back and be that person that can make a play. And I just wanted to give you props on making me a fan there, because it's hard. I'm super judgmental, man. I'm not a fan of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I've tried to work on it recently. Just trying to like be more cognizant. I think at the time it's probably because I was just really tunnel visioned actually. Yeah. I was like, okay, we can still, win every fight. So, and that's just kind of like the mentality, especially the academy team has, just kind of like, you can win every fight, even if you're down numbers, you just got to ult. And that's kind of like, that's kind of the mentality.
It's I think the word to describe it is grit, right? That's one thing that I really appreciate out of players. Atlanta Academy had it. I think the Rain had it too. It's just like this ability just to grind it out and try to take these fights. And you definitely exhibit that. It's honestly one of my favorite things. And so before we move on to Overwatch League, before we close this up, what advice would you give to people who are walking the path to pro now? And let's separate this, because there are a lot of people who, in Contender Season 0, still in Contenders, right? What would you say to them versus the kids like Icy, the kids like Sugar Free, who are still super, super young, following the path to pro now? What would you, if you could give each one of those groups one piece of advice, what would it be?
Probably just to be to keep grinding and stuff. It's just to keep up the motivation to play the game, and to keep playing as many hours as you can, and to not get burned out. That's just like the number one thing. I think it's just to keep playing. And burnout management, I think, is the two top things for sure.
Yeah, and so that's what you would give to both of them. What about the vets who are like still there? So they might be dealing with the burnout, but they haven't reached that level quite yet. What do you think is the main reason for a lot of that?
I think a lot of it is like general. It's probably reputation, a mix of reputation, and then also a mix of I don't know, maybe some sort of character flaw or something. I'm assuming. I don't know. I can't judge everybody, so it's just like. I think it's just a mix of a lot of things, but probably a big one is the reputation. So it's like the biggest thing you can do about your rep is just to keep playing and but just grind even harder if people don't believe in you. So even if you're a veteran, I think anybody can make it at a certain point.
Yeah, it's tough, especially since I think a lot of the players, even if they're vets in the scene, are definitely younger than me. When I'm 29, 30 years old. At this point, I'm a boomer. But it's hard to look at yourself and expect that you're going to be like that in 10 years, right? There's going to be a lot of change in your personality and your life, and sometimes this is what I say is like, if one person treats you like an asshole, they're the asshole. But if everyone treats you like an asshole, maybe you're the asshole. And that's something that I try to like reflect on and be like, you know what? I was the asshole. I'm going to change. And I hope more people are going to be able to self-reflect, and if it is a personality issue, because when you're in a team atmosphere, personality really, really matters. And that you can look inside and be like, okay, maybe if I just make this adjustment, I might not agree with it, but if I just make this adjustment and see if it helps, and it's worth it anyway. And it's not about being right or wrong. It's about being a part of that team and progressing in your career. So now I'm off my soapbox. Let's talk about some Overwatch League. So just in general, right? What are some highlights that you had? Let's talk about like a gameplay highlight, a personal highlight, and I want to hear a story, because something that you guys get to do is live in a team house, and I think most people assume that it's like a fraternity in general. And what's that like? Do you have any funny stories about that? So what were your highlights, and give us a nice little story about living with those boys.
Highlights probably was the homestand. Homestand was really exciting. We won. That was a really big moment. I think in my life, so that was really cool. And then stories, man. All the stories are very not PG, so
that's fine. We're PG.
No. I can't. Like not even should be public like that.
Well, I think we can all create the story after a statement like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What could this group of boys all under the age of 24 could possibly getting up to? Because I know I remember when I was that age, me and my buddies would go out, especially for like Halloween or something. We'd just be assholes, man. It was and it was so much fun because it's like you can destroy your body back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, speaking of destroying your body, what is it? Gator actually once was bet. You probably saw it online. Dufresne was trying to like make somebody jump into like a public pool. It was like a fountain outside like this fancy restaurant, and he was like, "I'll pay someone $200 to jump in it," and nobody wanted to do it. It was like freezing cold, and then they were like, "Okay, $300," and then no one said anything. They're like, "No, I don't want to do it." And then he's like, "All right, $500 to jump in it," and the Gator's like, "All right, fuck it, I'm doing it." So Gator just jumped in the pool and then sprinted to the car and made $500. So,
I mean, that's the same amount Carter got for letting you live with them. Exactly. the weight of those things is a little different. I probably would have jumped in for the $200, man. It doesn't take much for me.
I did not want to jump in that pool. The conditions were not optimal to jump into a public pool, to be honest.
Well, I mean, and Gator plays that way on Winston, so it all everything checks out. So, like to tie this up, man. So, like I said before the show, we can't talk about Dogman without talking about some of the trash talk that you came onto the scene because you said something along the lines of Cruz as a feeder, right? That's when people started really, really talking about you, is this like a character you enjoy playing? I remember talking to you at BlizzCon, and it was something that we talked about back then. I love it. Just to let you know, like I love it when you guys do this. But we did talk about earlier on, and like personality might be a reason why someone might have a harder time in Overwatch League. And so, what do you think about bringing that to the table? And the second one is, I'm sure you have someone that you like to riff off of, doing all of these things. Who do you like, kind of poking the most? Who when you're poking the bear, who you poking?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's a mix of things. I think Gator's like my ghostwriter. So I mean, he kind of tells me what to say. I just say it. But I think for the most part, it's just more of like an in the moment thing. It's not anybody specific. It's just kind of like, it doesn't matter who you are for the most part. If you're not, living up to my standards, then I probably will shit talk you at some point or something like that. It's just kind of like, because I shit talk myself constantly. So it's like a constant, it's a constant thing even with myself to keep myself up to a certain standard, right? So it's like if they're not also living up to that standard, then they're just a trash player, I guess. So for the most part, that's not something that like I even like plan or try to do. It's just kind of like naturally I'll be a dick. So that's just how it is, man. I don't know. It's not there's not some like master plan behind it. It's just an in the moment thing, and sometimes they're graded after, sometimes I don't. So it's just it comes with the territory, I guess.
Territory, right? Well, I mean, that makes it almost better, right? That means it's natural. You're passionate about it, right? And like you mentioned in a twit longer that you have that's pinned on your Twitter right now, you say that those exact words. It's all about holding them to that same kind of standard. If I'm trying, basically, you're vocalizing what we all want to say, like to the same people. Like we've all worked with someone who were like, "I'm better than you, but you're getting paid more than me, and I don't like this." We would love to vocalize that, but you actually do it. I think it takes a little bit of courage. But hey, thanks, man, for coming on. So the last thing I want to say is, and this is the last question for everyone on the show, is why Overwatch? You talked about it earlier that it was just a game, but is there anything particular about Overwatch that really just tickles your fancy?
I mean, I really like the hit scan characters a lot. I really like Widow. So yeah, I just like the hit scan characters a lot. That's what I play Overwatch for. So yeah.
Hell yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime. It was good to talk some Overwatch with you. So where can we find you on social media? And is there any news you would like for us to know?
No news yet. Just keep plastered on everything. My social medias are Dogman OW on pretty much everything on Twitter, Instagram, everything but Twitch, or no, not but Twitch, but YouTube. My YouTube is a little bit different, but I don't really use it anyway. So my Twitch is just Dogman, and everything else is Dogman W. Look me up, and yeah, no news though.
I tried, man.
No news yet.
It's all about asking the question, right? But anyway, man, once again, thank you for coming on. It was an absolute blast talking to you, getting to know you a little bit better, and seeing what's in that brain of yours. It was some good insight to you. Made me really think earlier about that whole all the teams are getting paid equally, man. I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while. But hey, for everyone at home, we do this every Thursday, and for once again to close it out, that's been what's been happening in Overwatch lately. We'll see you next week.